A swarm of bees settled under this umbrella and I was called to remove them. So I started scooping bees off the umbrella and putting them into a hive. When bees are in swarms like this, it means they're looking for a new place to live. They tend to be very docile since they don't have any resources to defend. They don't have a hive, food, or baby bees to protect, but they should have a queen. So with every handful of bees I scooped, I spent time searching for the queen. I repeated this process over and over again. By the time I removed most of the bees, I still had not seen the queen, and I realized this was an unusual case of a queenless swarm. This colony would not survive without a queen, but luckily I had an extra one on me I could give them. As soon as I gave the queen to the colony, they rushed to meet her. If they didn't accept her, they would try to kill her. If they did accept her, they would release her from the box by chewing through the piece of candy that stops up one end. As soon as the bees in the hive met the new queen, they began sending signals to the other bees telling them to move off the umbrella and into the box. So I just waited in the swarm of bees as the colony moved into their new home. After about 15 minutes, most of the bees were with their colony. So I checked on the queen and saw that the bees were starting to accept her. I waited a while longer for the bees to get in their new hive. Then I loaded them into my truck and drove home. I put the bees in my apiary so they could continue the important work they do in a place that's safer for them and for people, and it was another great day of saving the bees. I woke up one morning and my truck was covered with more bees than usual, so I ran outside in my pajamas to see what was going on. A swarm of bees that I caught the night before was leaving their hive and swarming again. I tried to offer their new hive back to them, but they weren't moving in very quickly, which told me that they wanted to go somewhere else. It was a race between me and the bees. I had to find the queen before the bees found a place to fly off to. After a few minutes, I found her. I put her in a clip to keep her safe, but before I could put her in the new hive, I had bees swarming to her in my hand. As soon as I put the queen in the hive, the bees began to go right in. I still had some bees on my hand who weren't leaving because they could still smell their queen on me. So I shook them off so they could find her. Within minutes, the entire colony was rushing to get back into their new hive. You can see how fast they were moving and how the queen was covered in bees. I waited for all the bees to get into their hive, and it was another great day of saving the bees in my pajamas. Bees had been living in this backyard shed for at least 2 years. The landlord wanted to call an exterminator, but the family who lived here wanted to save the bees, so they called me. When I lifted up the floor, I found a huge hive full of gentle bees. The hive was so big I had to remove another section of floor to access the entire thing. Then I started removing the hive. Whatever I removed from the original hive went right into the new one so the bees would have everything they need to survive. After I removed all of the comb, I started scooping bees into the new hive. As soon as I put the bees by the new hive, they marched right in. Then a stream of bees began running out from under the floor into the new hive. So I waited and watched to see if I could spot the queen bee in the crowd. After about 15 minutes, she appeared, so I put her in a clip to keep her safe. Once the queen was in the new hive, some bees began sending signals to help the other bees find their way home. I left the hive overnight, and by the next day, the entire colony was in their new home, and it was another great day of saving the bees. I got a call to remove bees from one of the weirdest places ever, this toilet. The bees had been living in the tank of this toilet for years, and they filled the entire space with comb and had no room left to grow. So I got to work removing the hive. Everything I removed from the original hive was safe for the bees to have in their new home. Here's what the comb looked like. This piece had honey at the top, pollen below, and brood on the bottom. I spent a lot of time carefully removing each piece of comb. This was a happy and healthy colony of honeybees, and they were not stinging me at all. After I removed all of the comb, the toilet was still full of bees, which told me the queen was in there. Suddenly, I saw her crawling up the side of the tank. I put her in a clip to keep her safe, and I placed her in the new hive. Then I made a little bee bridge that led straight to the queen so the bees could easily get to their new hive. It worked, and the bees marched right in. After the bees started to recognize the bee box as their new home, I closed up the hive, I waited for the colony to move into the box, then we drove home, and it was another great day of saving the bees. I got a call to remove a colony of bees from this backyard compost bin, and here's how I did it. First, I started to carefully remove the comb structure of the hive. I fit the pieces of comb that had baby bees and the bees' food into wooden frames. Next, it was time to start scooping bees into the new hive. I always wear protective equipment when I need to, but since I work with bees almost every day, I've learned to read their behavior and could tell that these bees, like most honeybees, were very gentle and would not try to sting me. So I kept removing comb and removing bees from the bin, all while looking for the queen bee. After I removed most of the bees, I saw the queen crawling up the side of the bin, so I put her in a clip to keep her safe. She's the largest bee in the colony, which makes her a little easier to find. There she is. I put the queen in the new hive and all the other bees started to follow her in. I had to get a bigger hive because there were so many bees, but after most of them went in the hive, I closed it up and carried it back to my truck, and it was another great day of saving the bees.
These bees started to build a hive on a patio chair, and I was called to remove them. The first thing I did was lift the cover of the chair to reveal a beautiful beehive with thousands of honeybees. I started to carefully remove the hive from the side of the chair, always looking for the queen bee every step of the way. As I removed each piece of comb, I put it in wooden frames of the new beehive using rubber bands to secure it for transit so that the bees could use it later on. There was a lot of comb, but also a ton of bees. So I used my hands and started scooping bees into their new hive while looking for the queen. Soon enough, I found her. Do you see her in there? She's the largest bee in the hive. There she is. I put her into the new hive and all the other bees started to go right in since they wanted to be with their queen. And this was all actually on the second story of a house, so I used some rope to lower the hive to the ground and I saved the bees. I got a call to remove a colony of bees from a compost bin, and here's how I did it. The colony had been there for months and there were tens of thousands of bees. So I started to carefully move the comb structure from the bin into a temporary travel hive. I put the comb into frames using rubber bands to secure it for transit. Then I started to get the bees into the temporary hive by scooping them up with my hands. These bees were pretty gentle and did not try to sting me as I worked with care and intention, all while looking for the queen bee, who is the largest bee in the colony. After I removed a lot of the worker bees, I suddenly saw the queen crawling on the side of the bin, so I put her in a clip to keep her safe. There she is. I put the queen in the new hive and all the other bees started to follow her scent. So I closed up the hive, I loaded it into my truck to take them to their new home, and it was another successful day of saving the bees.
Bees were living in this water meter and I was called to remove them, so I lifted the cover to reveal a beautiful hive. The bees hadn't been there for very long, but they had already built a lot of comb. The comb had eggs and baby bees, which let me know that the colony had a healthy queen. There was also pollen and nectar, but there was barely any honey yet. I put the comb into frames of the new hive so the bees would have everything they need after I moved them. I always wear protective gear when I need to, but these bees were very gentle and did not sting me. After I removed all of the comb, I started scooping bees into the new hive with my hands. As I was scooping bees, I noticed that the bees were going straight into the new hive, which let me know that the queen was probably already in there, so I gave the bees some smoke to move them a little quicker. Just like you and I do, bees move away from smoke, so as I used my smoker, the bees marched out of the old hive and into the new one to follow their queen. I waited for all the bees to get into their new hive, then I closed up the hive, loaded it into my truck, and it was another great day of saving the bees.